Hope Estheim looks innocent, right? Just like a 2/2 lifelinker that's got a little pixie haircut. Can't possibly be a stone cold commander, right? Pillow fort decks usually just put up walls and grind people out over a long period of time, if they win at all. But with Hope, we have a clear line to a surprise win, and yes, it may seem obvious, but it's not how you think. To achieve this goal, I scour the depths of Scryfall to find an optimal yet budget-friendly Hope Estheim deck. Then worked for hours and hours to make sure this video is the one that makes sure Hope isn't Cope. Hope Estheim is a 2-mana value life-linking Azorius bear. At your end step, you mill each opponent for each life you gained that turn. It's pretty simple, but let's go over a few things just to make sure. The strong part of Hope is that she only costs 2 mana, which means you can cast her several times throughout the game and use her ability multiple times. I like to look at it kind of like a rally race where you have checkpoints throughout the game that you need to hit until you rack up the win. This deck will aim to establish a normal pillow fort, while occasionally milling through life gain, gradually wearing down your opponent's decks to where you can cast Hope and protect her, then leverage a large life gain turn and wipe out your opponents. The budget for this deck is about $50 at the time of this recording, but it can easily be upgraded if your budget allows it. During the video, I'll have this symbol in the lower left-hand corner of the video, with a card, which means that card can be substituted into that section for any other card in that section. Usually there'll be budget upgrades, but we'll also sometimes provide gameplay variations. The deck falls into bracket 2, it has no game changers, no tutors. It's honestly kind of Magic in its purest form. You know, like it was 20 years ago when we had Johnny Cash and Steve Jobs and Bob Hope, and these days Magic has no cash, no jobs, but it still has Hope. Oh, and I guess it still has jobs, like those equipment cards from Final Fantasy, and I guess treasures are more plentiful than ever, and that's kind of cash, so you know what, let's just get to the deck breakdown. As always, the full deck list will be in the description below, where you can also find links to support the channel and myself on Patreon, Ko-Fi, or affiliate links where you can buy what you are going to buy normally and still support the channel. And a link to my 2-color commander mana base guide, which I think you can follow pretty closely here for this deck. The official deck list will be tuned to budget scenarios, but if you want to run your Tundra and fancy lands, feel free to do so. Hi, Bernie. What a good girl, Bernie. You're a good girl, Bernie. Speaking of fancy lands, what if I told you that Magic now has cards where both sides do things? That's right, Magic isn't just a one-sided card game anymore. Bayene Veil and Hydroelectric Specimen are spells with lands on their backs. The Veil side will help prevent some combat damage, and the Specimen side will help protect your Hope. I run both of the Azorius castles because they are super budget friendly, but also their effects are very good. Vantress will get you a Scry for 2, and Ardent Veil will make a 1/1 creature, which on itself isn't super relevant to our goals, but it does give you an endless supply of blockers. Wrapping up the utility lands are my personal favorites, first being Dust Bowl because lands in Commander are getting crazy, and this lets you turn any land you control into a wasteland. I'm always hard-pressed not to include this in basically every deck, since it's such a good land safety net. It does, however, have the potential to piss people off, so just use it smartly and you should be able to keep all your friends. My other personal favorite is Prov, Spires of Order. Back when Maze of Ith was super expensive, I used this as an inexpensive way to kind of mimic that effect. And it's important that it can prevent non-combat damage in addition to combat damage. Also, yes, this is probably still way worse overall than Maze of Ith, which these days actually isn't all that expensive, so if you have the budget, I would probably run that here. We start the ramp with these staples, both Arcane Signet and Sol Ring, and move right into the staples for Azorius and Azorius Signet and Talisman of Progress. We run 2 more generic 2-mana value rocks in Mind Stone and Everflowing Chalice. The extra card on Mind Stone is good, and the flexibility of Everflowing Chalice makes it one of my favorite generic 2-mana rocks. Then we run a couple of deck-specific ramp pieces and Pristine Talisman, which is a fine rock, being 2-mana value and coming into play untapped for generic mana. The extra life each use aligns with what we want to do pretty well. The other specific ramp is Will Scion of Peace, which is a card I've always wanted to build a deck around for a long time, I just never got around to it. It is mana reduction, and I'm always not a fan of that, but I think in cases where it's not that hard to get his X up to like 3, I think that's just too much cost reduction to ignore. I always say you can't have pillows without forts, I think. I mean, give me a break. It's my first pillow fort deck, and I don't really have a ton of zingers lined up and ready to go, so just let's move on. Ghostly Prison and Propaganda are the linchpins of most Pillow Fort type decks, so obviously they go here. But we also run a lot of Propaganda-like cards. In no particular order are Norn's Annex, Bard Steward of Argive, Archon of Absolution, Sphere of Safety, Windborn Muse. There are others you could run, so feel free to run what you like. These are all pretty interchangeable, and if you have one you like, go for it. Now I consider Blind Obedience a Pillow Fort card since it slows your opponents down up front as opposed to after the fact. Also, the Extort can get you a good chunk of life, so I like it in this style of deck. And then I run the White Fogs, Festival and Holy Day. While Fogs are certainly stronger and more impactful in green, these two can be used wonderfully as surprises to prevent alpha attacks, and not only that, but they can be used as political pieces, which is an advantage in and of itself. Azorius allows for a lot of good interaction. It also allows for a lot of bad interaction, which I will feature right now. Light of Hope and Lucky Offering, they're bad, but also I won't ever play these anywhere else, I don't think, so I just want to try them out here just to make sure they are as bad as they seem they are. Similarly bad is Condemned, though I don't know that it's actually super bad, but this should probably just be Swords to Plowshares. But you know what? It's not. So they're Swords to Plowshares. How do you like that? Peace Talks is really just a cheap and bad silence. It's there to protect Hope, but it does have the upside of preventing an attack if your plan kind of goes belly up, and it does get back to your opponent's turn. Now we get to some good cards. Well, maybe not good in the abstract, but definitely versatile, which is good in my opinion. Reprieve and Dovin's Veto are fine counters, but you could realistically run any cheap counter spell here, especially ones that would protect Hope. Heliod's Intervention and Overrule are X-mana spells that help you control the board, but also can gain you a truckload of life. These are probably the only cards in this section that I would suggest on their own merit. And to be honest, if you want to run the good removal and counter spells that Azorius has, go for it. I just kind of get bored running the same cards over and over and over. I'd rather play subpar cards than these same cards in every deck. Dovin's Acuity is probably a bit underpowered, but it's something you can abuse in this deck, so I feel like it warrants a shot. Faithful Mending seems like a solid cycler, letting you churn through cards and gain a bit of life at the same time. Factor Fiction is just one of my favorite cards ever. I run it wherever I can. And Memories Returning seems not too bad and is similar enough to Factor Fiction that I might fool myself into thinking it's another Factor Fiction. Isperia, Supreme Judge, and Sphinx of Revelation are kind of like other cards, but for drawing. Isperia is like a Ghostly Prison, but you get a card instead of making them pay more mana, and Sphinx of Revelation is like, I guess, Sphinx's Revelation, but on a creature. Then we get to Socrates, who I never really grok how this card works. I feel like I have to reread it 5 times every game just to make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing with the card. But any cards from the Bill and Ted Universes Beyond is good in my book. You need wipes, because sometimes, no matter how many barriers to defeat you have, people are going to want to win the game, in spite of your soft pillowiness. Wrath of God and Supreme Verdict are just gold standard creature wipes. They have a purpose, they serve that purpose well, efficiently, and simply. Fumigate is similar in that it's very simple, but the extra mana cost can gain us a good amount of life. Then we hit the flex slots, where I like to play around. Aetherize will work sort of like a fog, but will also kill token creatures, as well as bounce one player's creatures that are all attacking. You can also use this politically, so it's one of those cards that isn't overwhelmingly powerful, but has a lot of edge cases where it can see its power drastically increase. Promise of Loyalty lets you more or less wipe the board, but it keeps your hope in play. Now, either of these can be swapped out for better strict wipes or things that'll hit artifacts. I would be wary about stuff that hits enchantments, since you do rely on a good number of enchantments like the Shrines package. We run the blue and white of each shrine cycle, broken down like this. 2 Hondens, Cleansing Fire, and Seeing Winds. They'll get you life and cards per shrine. The 2 Sanctums, Tranquil Light and Calm Waters, which will get you some board control and some more cards. And then the Goshen Tai of Lost Wisdom and of Shared Purpose, which will get you some targeted mill and a bunch of blockers. You won't probably ever have all these in play, and that's not really the goal, but we are aiming to have about 2 or 3 of these out in play to get the real good value from them. We've got a lot of life to gain, so buckle up. And we'll start with Cleric class, which will basically just add +1 to each life we get. The other stuff is fine, but it's mostly just here for the +1.
I feel like you're just here for the
+1. Elixir of Immortality and, I guess just Elixir, will get you some life, but then also refill your library, just in case you get into one of those battles where you can't kill them and they can't kill you and you just want some inevitability. Next up are some gradual life gainers, gaining life in small chunks over time. Cosmos Elixir and Senate Guildmage will both either get you some life or a card, though in slightly different ways. Union of the Third Path will cycle, but then get you a solid chunk of life, while Wall of Reverence can get you a chunk of life on each of your turns. We don't really utilize graveyard abilities or effects, so Ashes of the Aberrant is kind of free for us and will generate lots of life, especially if we play it early. Now we get to the heavy hitters, or I guess the heavy lifers. The idea with this deck is that you play a Pillow Fort scheme a bit here and there, and then use spells or kind of one-shot ways to gain a bunch of life, use Hope, and mill your opponents out. Alabaster Potion and Sanguine Sacrament are close to just fireballs, where you gain life and your opponents mill. These will obviously get you a lot of life in one go and therefore have the potential to catch people off guard if they think you're playing for a long incremental mill game. Sphinx's Revelation is similar but a bit more expensive, but it has the upside that you get to draw cards. You can fire this off early to get a few cards or save it to hopefully end the game. War Report, Honor the Fallen, and Riot Control will gain you life based on either the number of creatures and artifacts in play, or creatures in the graveyard, or just creatures all your opponents control. These are all easily able to reach 10 to 15 life in a single shot. Requiring a bit more setup, but just as potent, is Martyr of Sands. Play the Martyr, sacrifice it, and you could be looking at something like a 2-mana investment for 12 life. Space-Time Anomaly doesn't directly gain life, but it does play off the life you may have already gained throughout the course of the game. Be aware that this is a single target effect, so try to use it after a player or two may have already been milled out or killed by one of the other players. Last and certainly not least is Faith Healer, which is probably my favorite card in the deck and one of the inspirations behind this deck. The idea would be Pillow Fort up with a bunch of enchantments, get Hope out, then sacrifice the enchantments to gain a ton of life, thus milling your opponents into dust in one fell swoop. I'm now starting to implement something I call deck difficulty, which isn't power level or anything, it's the difficulty in winning the game playing this deck. Think of it like when you choose a difficulty in a video game. So like, for example, I would rate this deck a difficulty of 7. The Pillow Fort idea isn't complex and we don't have that many nuanced interactions. However, it is a budget deck and some of the choices are suboptimal. I also have a handful of personal card choices that aren't optimal either. Additionally, I use a lot of cards that I haven't ever used before, mostly because they have a subpar effect, but they have the added kicker of life gain. So expect this deck to challenge your game awareness and your political acumen. This deck also only really has one win condition. You mill everyone, either by Hope life gain shenanigans or by the gradual passage of time. If you want to up the potential scenarios for winning, Approach of the Second Sons slots pretty well into this deck, and any classic Azorius Infinite combo will also work well. Azorius has the potential for lots of tutors, so you can always make combos easier to get together. If you're looking for a bit of a more aggressive Azorius budget deck, check out this deck video I did on Aisha Tanaka. Or if you want even more Azorius control, check out this video that I did on Afara God of the Polis, which is probably still my favorite deck and my favorite deck video of all time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.